All right, welcome fans to another edition of Ranking the Albums. And today we have a very special band here that we're going to talk about, none other than Rainbow. And to help me do that, we're bringing in a couple of our notorious music critics here, none other than Mr. David Hens and Mr. Thom Jennings. Welcome, guys. Welcome.
Awesome. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
All right. Well, this is the first time we've ever done one of these together, and this is definitely looks like it's going to be a fun one here. So we're going to talk some Rainbow here. We're going to do it a little differently than we normally do it because of the way the catalog is set up nicely for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Dio era, then we're going to talk about Graham Bonnet. We're going to talk about the Joe Lynn Turner era, and then of course we'll discuss the Doogie White era. So without further ado, we're going to kick it off with the Dio era here. And so basically the Dio era consists of 3 albums. The first one, obviously, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, which was released in August of 75. Rainbow, which Rising, which was released in May of 76. And of course, the last Dio one, Long Live Rock and Roll, April of 78. And oddly enough, none of the Rainbow catalog ever achieved gold status. It's hard to believe. I know.
That surprises me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I thought for sure at least, there was at least 1 or 2 albums in there that might have even, I was thinking maybe one of them maybe even went platinum. When I say gold status, I mean, obviously in the US, they did have a few gold albums in UK and Japan, stuff like that. But as far as US record sales are concerned, yeah, no gold, no platinum, nothing in that manner. Kind of strange, yeah, for sure. So the Dio era, let's delve into this here. So as I mentioned, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow came out in 75. That's the one that kickstarted it all off. And then we came up with Rising and then Long Live Rock and Roll. These are the 3 albums a lot of people looking back on. They really remember this era fondly of the Rainbow era. What's your guys' take on the Dio era? If you want to start it off, David.
Oh yeah, as you know, I'm a big Dio fan. So, I mean, these 3 records are obviously my favorite of the bunch. But I mean, I think the metal and like the neoclassical style that Blackmore was playing at that time, he kind of perfected it on the Long Live Rock and Roll record. But then they transitioned away from that as he got a little more commercial and mainstream. I mean, obviously with like the Difficult to Cure, that's when he kind of transitioned. He became infatuated with that Foreigner album sound, and that's what the metal of those early albums. I mean, like the first album, Man on the Silver Mountain, is a classic. Catch the Rainbow is great, and then once you get to Rising, you have like Terror Woman and Stargazer, which is epic. I mean, Cozy Powell's performance on those early records is tremendous. So, I definitely gravitate towards the earlier stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So Thom, what's your take on this Dio era here?
We've discussed this in previous rankings that a lot of times a band has a sentimental starting point. Maybe it's your first concert. So in my case, the very first concert that I saw involving Rainbow was it was a triple bill, Rainbow with the Scorpions and a group called Riot, not Quiet Riot. And that was during the Straight Between the Eyes tour. And I love that record. I love Joe Lynn Turner's vocals, in as much as sometimes he sounds a little bit too close to Lou Gramm for my comfort. The Dio era, now, interestingly enough, the first time I saw Dio was with Black Sabbath. So I was introduced to Dio with Sabbath, and then I had to go backwards and discover that Rainbow material. So I have a lot of fondness for it. I prefer Dio with Rainbow in a live setting. I think the live recordings just tend to be a little bit better than the studio recordings. I don't think there's any problem with the lack of quality of the writing or the songs or even necessarily the musicianship, but I feel like those first three records suffered from some of them some pretty lousy production that wasn't necessarily as evident on some of the later records. I mean, the mixing is on some of them is very questionable.
Yeah, and I believe Martin Birch actually worked on some of those earlier recordings there as the producer. So that was kind of surprising. Yeah, him and Blackmore did the first one along with Ronnie. They kind of all co-produced it. And then for Rising, it was all Martin Birch, and then Long Live Rock and Roll was Martin Birch. So
yeah, I mean, Long Live Rock and Roll of the three is definitely, I think, sonically the best sounding record. Rising it would probably be the best in terms of the songwriting and the musicianship, at least again, in my opinion. And then, Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. Again, yeah, a lot of that goes back to sentimentality too. You're introduced to a band, the very first record. So many artists just have a really good first record out of the box, and you can't really fault them for that. But keep in mind too that that Richie had a history. I mean, this guy he was from Deep Purple, so people kind of knew him. He was a known commodity, and he was being measured against Deep Purple too, which I think is something that Rainbow has always kind of lived in the shadow of Deep Purple. I mean, do you guys agree with that?
yeah, that's a good statement on that for sure. Because obviously his old Deep Purple bandmate Roger Glover ended up joining up here later on down the road, Down to Earth. He actually produced that one. So yeah, I mean, a lot of connections here between Purple and and then obviously Joe and Turner would end up in Deep Purple down the road well after Rainbow's demise. So yeah, definitely a lot of connections there. Looking at the three Dio albums, that's I find the first album to be the weakest out of the three, just in terms of catchy songs. The musicianship is good. I don't have no problem with that, but I just feel the material wasn't as strong. Rising really, they really brought up the songs there, like Dave had mentioned, Stargazer. I mean, that's probably one of the most epic Rainbow songs, and yet it's probably not even one of their most popular, well-known songs compared to as far as radio airplay goes. But it's definitely, for me, probably one of the best. That's right on the top of the hill there. Tarot Woman, Long Live Rock and Roll. Obviously, that's a song that Ronnie kept playing throughout his whole solo career even. So, he felt strongly about that song. And Kill the King off of the Long Live Rock and Roll album, Gates of Babylon. There's some really good, deep cut, Lady of the Lake. Another quality song off Long Live Rock and Roll. So, yeah, I mean, I felt that the Dio era was strong, but obviously it didn't last too long. As after Long Live Rock and Roll, pretty much that was the end of that era of the band. So let's go down to Down to Earth, which would be the only album with Graham Bonnet singing. There it is. Nice and handy there.
Mhm.
What do you think about that one, David?
I like this album. I'm a big fan of Graham Bonnet as a singer overall. I don't think this is the best album he's ever been on, but I think Since You've Been Gone was obviously the big hit off the album, and I think that's one of the weaker tracks on it. But it's catchy, and it's not even a song that they wrote. So, but if you go by what Blackmore says, he called most of the album rubbish, and he just doesn't care for it. But I think he says that about a lot of his catalog in recent years, because he's kind of transitioned out of that whole hard rock and metal scene. But there's some great songs on here, like Eyes of the World and Lost in Hollywood is a great track.
Yeah, I mean, obviously All Night Long, the kickoff track on the album, that one is relatively one of the ones that got a little bit of, people are definitely familiar with that one. I actually thought No Time to Lose was pretty good. But obviously, Since You've Been Gone, obviously was the main song on the album that probably helped drive the album sales that it did reach. It ended up with number 66 on the album charts for Down to Earth, which was a improvement over Long Live Rock and Roll, because that was the previous album, which clocked in at number 89. So, it also, like you had mentioned, with Since You've Been Gone, they seemed like Rainbow later on in their career were always looking for that hit single when they started trying to go Way of Foreigner. And it's quite funny how, Since You've Been Gone was one of those ones that still probably remains one of the probably most well-known songs throughout their whole career.
Yeah, I mean, you still hear it on the radio today. So
Yeah. So, Tom, what's your take on the Mr. Graham Bonnet era here?
I agree with everything that's been said so far. And Since You've Been Gone, I mean, it's the funny thing is, I grew up. I don't know if it's because I grew up in Rochester, New York, listening to radio stations or whatnot, but I grew up with the Head East version. The only reason I even knew later on that Rainbow did a version of it was because I remember seeing a video on MTV, and it was one of those, cheesy performance style videos that I don't even think was made for MTV. It was just one of those kind of promotional things that they did back then. And what's crazy is the Head East version and the Rainbow version are just so similar. It's almost like, why bother re-recording it? Almost like Life is a Highway, Tom Cochran and Rascal Flatts. You never thought we'd mention Rascal Flatts in a Rainbow review, but I mean, All Night Long, to me, it's such a great opening song. And I mean, I should have mentioned this before. On all 8 Rainbow albums, I hope you guys agree with me. Every single one of them, the first song on the record is great. It's like Richie just knows what to lead off with. And to me, this is typical of, just a real, it really grabs you. A lot of hooks on this record. It kind of bridges the sort of quasi progressive dark metal era with Dio and transitions it into the more AOR, Foreigner type sounding Joe Lynn Turner era. So I love this record. It's a shame they didn't last a little bit longer together, but I think that this is fairly representative of what Rainbow was. And I said a lot of hooks on it, a lot of great just sort of guitar riffs that open every single one of these songs. And again, I agree. I think the weakest track is Since You've Been Gone. And it's a great song, but it really just seems to me like an AM pop track. It doesn't seem like a track that a rock band would perform.
All right, so that takes us through the Down to Earth era here with Graham Bonnet. Now we're going to get into the next era, which was the Joe Lynn Turner era, and obviously this one also a 3-album era, which you see Difficult to Cure over there. It's Dave's holding up there. 1981 Difficult to Cure. That's when Joe Lynn Turner came in. 1982 Straight Between the Eyes, and then 1983 has Been Out of Shape. So yeah, so this is like they did 3 albums in a row, one each year, which is something they really didn't do too much. They went back to back in the Dio era, and then they skipped the 2 years before Long Live Rock and Roll came out, and then obviously it was 2 years between Graham Bonnet and Difficult to Cure. So Joe Lynn Turner comes in, and definitely you can see the shift in the material and the writing, and they're gearing up, trying to become Foreigner Junior there, which unfortunately did not really do anything. I mean, it did help them with their album sales a little bit. They ended up with Straight Between the Eyes made it top 30, Been Out of Shape 34. I mean, Difficult to Cure was even number 50. So I mean, they kept they just couldn't really get out of that 30 era there. That's where it's almost like they were stuck in a rut there in a way. And that Joe Lynn Turner era ended pretty much right after Been Out of Shape. Sadly, I mean, I really thought the Joe Lynn Turner album era was very, even though people were always trying to say that they were related to kind of like Foreigner, there's some really heavy songs on, especially Straight Between the Eyes, which, you know, that album really has a lot of cool cuts on, without a doubt. You know, with obviously the main track that most people would know would be Stone Cold, but you know, Death Alley Driver has a powerful riff power. You know, there's definitely Tearing Out My Heart. That's another phenomenal song. Joe Lynn Turner sings. Bent Out of Shape was the final one, as far as the studio album's concerned with Joe Lynn Turner. You know, you couldn't really go away. You turn on MTV and there was Street of Dreams. Yeah, I must have seen that video about 1,000 times. But sadly enough, the song itself, you know, they just never really did a dent on the singles charts here. You know, and that's what they were trying to shoot for, and unfortunately, they never really accomplished the goal here. Number 40, Stone Cold, was the highest any of their singles ever reached. So they got one top 40 hit, and it just made the top 40. So, you know, I mean, I thought this Joe and Turner album era was solid. But they just didn't get over that hump. I don't know, whoever wants to take it from here.
Yeah, I mean, Joe and Turner, I like him as a singer. I think I've come to like those three albums more as I've gotten older. I would like, when I was a teenager, it was pretty much Dio or bust for me. I couldn't get into the later stuff, but I think I've come to appreciate it more. And I think I'd have to say Straight Between the Eyes is probably my favorite of the three. I mean, it's got the heaviest, like as you mentioned, Death Alley Driver is great. Stone Cold is great. I mean, just the production on that album, it sounds really good. Like the vinyl version is great. Mistreated is a great song. Like Difficult to Cure, I think is the weakest of the three. I mean, I know I'd heard the album many times in the past, but I honestly had to go back and listen to it this week because it's just none of those songs really resonated too deeply with me. But I know like I Surrender was the first song on the album, and that's like another cover that they didn't write, but and you still hear that like occasionally. But and then with like Bent Out of Shape, Street of Dreams is the hit, but I think Dancing with the Devil or Drinking with the Devil, sorry, that's the song that's probably become my favorite off that album. And I think that kind of set the stage for what they would do on Slaves and Masters with Deep Purple when Joe and Turner came in in 1990. So it's kind of got that same vibe.
Yeah. So let's hear from the wizard here. What's your take on this Joe Lynn Turner era here?
Yeah, I agree. Difficult to Cure is the weakest of the three Joe Lynn albums, and which there's three songs on it that I really love, which is I Surrender, Spotlight Kid, and Can't Happen Here. But again, very AOR. There's really none of that kind of gothic metal-y thing that we sort of had during the Dio era. And again, it kind of goes back to that down to earth sort of bridged it and moved in that direction. I Surrender, by the way, was written by a guy named Russ Ballard, who also wrote Since You've Been Gone. So there's the connection there. They tried to maybe have lightning strike twice with recording a Russ song. But yeah, the album itself as a whole is kind of weak. It just the rest of the songs after those three are not that great. Yeah, Straight Between the Eyes, love that record. Sentimental favorite. Saw him on that tour. Own it. You know, it's my copy is sitting right here. It's like one of those records you can hide your face and make it look like a face. You know, so I don't know if you've ever seen people do that with their vinyl records. And I think Joe Lynn Turner's vocal performance on this, but really, Straight Between the Eyes is the best produced record in terms of the mix and the musicianship and all that stuff. This was a pretty good lineup. I mean, you had, I know on Difficult to Cure, you had Don Airey and, I mean, I don't know. It's, again, it's so strange to think that this is the same band that was the Dio band, and even when I saw Rainbow with Joe Lynn Turner, they really didn't I don't even remember them doing any Dio material. And this was that's only the second record, which was with Joe Lynn Turner. In fact, and not only do I not remember them doing any Dio material, which my mind could be playing tricks on me. They didn't do Since You've Been Gone. I think they did a couple of tracks from Down to Earth, but like All Night Long. But they had really removed themselves from that whole Dio era at that point, and were trying to fully reinvent themselves. So I don't know. That's why I think even when we were discussing this off air, what we should do in terms of approaching this catalog, it becomes so difficult because it's like, you know, is it really the only common thread through this band is Richie, because even the members change so much throughout the course of its history that it has an imprint on how the band's sounds, you know?
Yeah, definitely. You're right. I remember looking this up because I was curious as to see what they were doing on when Joel and Turner came into the band. And you're right, they were doing some Dio. I think they did play a couple tracks from Down to Earth
On the first tour, but I don't think they
yeah,
did
on the
that.
first
But I
tour,
think,
right?
yeah,
By the time Straight Between the Eyes came, you had two Joel and Turner albums already out there, and with the strength of the material from Straight Between the Eyes, they focused in on that, which made sense because that was the tour you were promoting, and then you popped in some other things here from other tours.
yeah. Well, and also the Straight Between the Eyes tour, that was a double bill. I mean, I don't know who opened on any other dates, but it was a Rainbow and Scorpions show. So they only played for like an hour and 10, hour and 15. It wasn't like they were playing, because I just was looking over some live recordings as I was going back and re-listening to the catalog, and there's like an 83 recording, and they're doing a whole bunch of Dio. So it's like they went to the Straight Between the Eyes era, and then they just shifted. In fact, they didn't do Jealous Lover at the show I saw them at either, which was a song that was getting some airplay. So I don't know. This band is a bit of an enigma to me in terms of how they just sort of just became so different from record to record. I mean, there's bands like Yes that have lineup changes throughout their history, but there seems to be this thread that sort of keeps it together. With Rainbow, it just seems like, again, whatever's Richie's whim at the time, you know.
Mhm.
And Street of Dreams, by the way, I don't know if David's heard it either. There's Blackmore's Night. They and I listened to a lot of those Blackmore's Night records because I really love Celtic music as being somebody of Irish heritage. And they do a really cool version of Street of Dreams, the sort of the Celtic style. So it's a pretty cool song. I wish it had done better than it did, but yeah, these were all very radio friendly. The Joe Lynn Turner stuff was all very radio friendly. It really was.
Yeah, the only problem is that the radio wasn't very friendly to that. Unfortunately, that's the only downside.
You know,
to it.
I remember them getting sales. I just don't remember. I guess that's when you told me that there was not a single Rainbow record that had hit gold. That surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't even aware of it myself till I actually looked it up, and then you know they've had some solid songs on these albums here, so I was kind of surprised that
Yeah.
Stone Cold is the highest charting at number 40. The only top 40 hit. I thought for sure Street of Dreams would have been a top 40.
Right.
Looking back on the catalog since you've been gone, I figured that was probably in the top 40.
Just missed. Yeah, both. It's the Head East version and the Rainbow version charted at just about like 43, 44. So strange.
Yeah. All right, so that takes us through the Joe and Turner era. We've got one more era to discuss, and that's the Doogie White era. He came aboard in '95 was when we got Stranger in Us All, which actually is the final Rainbow album to date. There's always a lot of chatter going on out there. I don't know if you've been catching all the latest. Joe and Turner's been kind of out there pretty vocal over the last month here, talking about how he was trying to get the Rainbow reunited with, the remaining members who are still alive out there. And then he kind of dissed, the version that's actually out there now, or the last version that is out there playing the live material.
Mhm.
It's just, but the Doogie White era, that's something you don't hear too much about. The album quietly came out right in the middle of the grunge era, 1995. What's your take on this album, Dave?
Yeah, I've interviewed Doogie before, and I asked him about it, and he had nothing but positive things to say about the process, and like he felt that it was a moment where they felt like a genuine band. He said that they went to a cabin in upstate New York and they recorded it together, and they spent like 6 weeks just getting to know each other and getting comfortable with one another. But I mean, the songs, they're not really not on the same level as the earlier material. I mean, the one song that stands out to me from the album is Ariel, and I think that's one of the ones that if you go on YouTube and you can watch videos of them performing that song live, it's pretty cool. It's got kind of the older riffage, that like the metal style, that it's kind of like the dramatic flourishes in it that Richie had in the Dio era. But then again, I mean, Richie, at the end of the day, he's going to do what he wants to do, and regardless of how well it started, Doogie told me that he had a falling out with Richie at the end. That's why it just didn't last. So, but again, I mean, I don't know how many people have actually heard that album unless they're like a diehard Rainbow fan, because it pretty much came out and disappeared as quickly as that. So,
Yeah, what do you got for us on this one, Tom? You familiar with the album too that well?
It's funny going back to that Rock Palast double record. So I was at I think it was it wasn't House Guitars, maybe Record Archive, but a record store nonetheless. I mean, it doesn't really, people out of the area don't know those, but I'm at a record store and I find this great double green vinyl live Rainbow record. And I look at the lead singer, I'm like, I don't recognize this guy. And I thought it was the newer version that came out, 4 or 5 years ago. And I listened to it. I was like, dang, this is really good. And at that point, I did a little digging and I was like, wow, there was a Rainbow album that came out in the 90s. I'm like, really? So at really the first time I listened to it was to do the ranking. And generally, it's one of those weird ones. I think that so many classic era bands, if they try to reform, they're always going to get crapped on some level, because they're measuring up against all the previous stuff that they've done. And I don't hate this album, but I agree. I think it just doesn't. It's just not really a strong record in terms of the songwriting. My favorite one was the Hunting Humans. I think it the first song, Wolf to the Moon, in typical Rainbow fashion of all the 8 records. It's a great opening number, but this is really, I think by this point, this is even though he's co-writing with Doogie White, it's really just and his wife's involved in this one. This is kind of like Blackmore's Night Electric. It's more so than, say, what we've come to expect from Rainbow, which again, when you hear this lineup playing live, I mean, they're great. I mean, they did, in fact, all right, I'm going to go out on a limb, guys. You're going to judge me for this statement, but I think in some ways, like if you compare this to Van Halen, okay, Van Halen had 2 really prominent singers. You got Roth and you got Hagar. Now Rainbow had 3, but technically we'll take Grant Bonnet out of it because it only lasted for 1 record. But they had Dio, they had Joel and Turner, very distinct voices or whatever. I thought Doogie White did a nice job handling both of their material. His voice kind of lands somewhere in the middle, just like I felt like Gary Cherone, in as much as that Van Halen 3 is not a great album. But if you look at Van Halen concerts with Cherone singing Hagar and Roth material, dude, he killed it. He was great. He was a phenomenal vocalist in a live setting. And so if you're going to rank the Van Halen catalog, everybody's going to stick Van Halen 3 on the bottom. And I think everybody's probably going to stick this one on the bottom of the Rainbow catalog at all, or as well. But it's not necessarily because of the lead singer or even the lineup. It's just, I don't know. It's just one of those records that kind of came out as an afterthought too. Because remember, this band hadn't been active. And in reality, it's not even the Rainbow band, because I don't think there's anybody on this record that had ever been on another Rainbow record other than Richie Blackmore.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah, they probably been better off calling it something else, in which that's what he did after he left. That Blackmore's Night thing. So
yeah. I mean, it's that King Crimson dilemma. Adrian Belew, if you ever read interviews with Adrian Belew, and they had this project that they were going to do. I think they were going to call it 3 of a Perfect Pair, which wound up being that first King Crimson record with Adrian Belew. But he said they go out and everyone's like, what's this nonsense? And because the record company said, oh no, you got to call that King Crimson because that's the name that sells. Yes, 90125. That was supposed to be something else before, and they're like, no, you got to call it Yes because people buy Yes records. They're not going to buy a cinema record. They're not going to buy a Three of a Perfect Pair record. So I think with Richie, he said, well, I got a brand name. It's Rainbow. He owns the rights to it. And he recorded under that moniker. And, I don't fault him for it, but it doesn't really stand up to the rest of the catalog.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, too, is that like Graham Bonnet did one album with Rainbow, and then he was with Alcatraz. And then when Graham Bonnet left Alcatraz last year, Doogie White took over for him in Alcatraz. So they've always kind of had like an intertwined career in a lot of ways.
Very similar voices, too. Very similar voices, for sure. And maybe similar hatred for Richie Blackmore. I don't know.
Poor Richie.
Graham Bonnet's always had kind of that nomadic personality where he was always moving on to the next project. So,
yeah. I mean, if you guys want to hear my quick personal interaction with Richie Blackmore's story, I'll interject it because I know you don't want to run too long. But I was working at a bar and Deep Purple was on one of their reunion tours. This is post the Joe Lynn Turner Rainbow era, so you can probably figure the time frame. I don't know, it's 84, 85, 86, whatever. And the whole band shows up at the bar I'm working at. They're hanging out, they're dancing, they're having a good time. Ian Gillan, the lead singer, he gets a little bit drunk. He's dancing on the dance floor. Richie stands in the corner the whole time, doesn't talk to anybody. He's got his arms crossed and he's frowning. And after about, I don't know, a short period of time, he just gets irritated and takes the limo back to the hotel and strands Gillan at the bar. So again, yeah, it was just so classic because here's Ian, Mr. Fun Guy. Richie comes in, he's all dressed all dark, and he's just like, I'm out of here. I don't want to talk to anybody. And Ian's like, can you get me back to the hotel? I got no limo. All right, whatever. It sounded a little like Ozzy. I'm sorry. That's my best Ian Gillan.
All right. Well, that concludes our talking about the album. So let's get into the rankings. So we're gonna do this. So let's go. You said we want to do it like the top. Do your bottom five first.
Sure.
All right. So let's start with David. Let's go. Your number 8 all the way down to your number 4.
All right. Yeah, my number 8 is Stranger in Us All, which is not a mystery at this point. But and 7, I had Difficult to Cure. 6, I had Been Out of Shape. 5, I had the first album, Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, and then 4, I had Straight Between the Eyes.
Ooh, okay. What do you got for yours there, Tom?
I'm cracking up because I got the same for 8, same for 7, same for 6, same for 5. So Stranger in Us All, Difficult to Cure, Been Out of Shape, Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. But for 4, I have Down to Earth.
Okay. So mine's going to change it up a little bit here, but I think somewhat the same albums are kind of going to be down there. Number 8, obviously, we all agree for sure. Just like you said with Van Halen 3, Stranger in Us All. That was a great analogy, by the way. Number 7, believe it or not, for me is Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the material. For me, it's just not a strong overall album, but it does have its deep, good cuts on it. So for me, that came in at number 7. Number 6, I'm going with Difficult to Cure. 5, kind of surprised myself, but I had to pick Long Live Rock and Roll. That one is, I just find that one's just not that good. And I'm agreeing with you, Tom, on number 4, Down to Earth. All right.
Okay.
So that takes us down to our top 3 where we can really delve into this. Go ahead, Dave. Let's hear what your top 3 are from number 3 on down to your number 1.
All right, yeah, my number 3, I had Down to Earth. Again, it's the only album with Graham Bonnet, but I still think it holds up pretty well. So, and then number 2, I had Long Live Rock and Roll. I'm just a big Dio fan. I think the only weak spot on this album for me is the last song, Rainbow Eyes. It's kind of a soft ballad, but I mean, Dio has a voice where he can pretty much tackle any material. But when you have songs like the title track, Lady of the Lake, Gates of Babylon and Kill the King. And Rainbow Eyes closing it out kind of feels like a fizzle, but still a solid album overall. And then my number one is obviously Rising. I mean, the album cover is iconic. Just the song. For me, this is the best lineup of the band with Tony Carey on the keyboards, Jimmy Bain on the bass, and then Richie, Ronnie, and Cozy. Just a killer trio. So.
All right. What are you giving us, Tom, for your 3?
I have Straight Between the Eyes is number 3. Number 2, I came in at Rising, and number 1, Long Live Rock and Roll, which, Joey, of course, you and I now are not friends anymore because you didn't give it as high a ranking as I did. No. Yeah, and I kind of vacillated between Rising and Long Live Rock and Roll, but I think Rising has better material. I think it just suffers from really mediocre production. Just I don't know. I just don't like. I don't know if this record's ever been remastered or remixed, but it really could use a bottom end. It's got no bottom end whatsoever. It's kind of weird, and even just the way the instrumentation it was mixed, it was odd. And Dio, it's funny. I thought about it as I was listening to it again today and listening to the mix, and I wondered aloud. I don't know if you guys know the I'm sure David does. Maybe you do too, Joey, because David said he's a big Dio fan. But the whole controversy with Black Sabbath and Live Evil, in that they kicked Dio and Vinny Appice out because they thought that Dio was tooling with the mix and trying to bring his vocals up or whatever. If you ever get a chance to see the album credits on the back of Live Evil, it's interesting how they crap on Vinny, but and even Bill Ronnie James Dio on that one, as you know. But so it almost made me wonder. And Ronnie's always said, "No, I wasn't messing with the levels or anything." But you wonder if maybe during his tenure with Richie that he got a little frustrated at how Richie mixed his vocals, because I don't think there's ever really I think Long Live Rock and Roll is the best mix in terms of Ronnie's vocals of the 3 for sure. But yeah, I mean, Rising, it's like, man, I don't know. It's weird.
All right. So for me, number 3 was Bent Out of Shape.
Ooh.
Yep. Number 2 was Rising, which that leaves Straight Between the Eyes for me as number 1. Joe and Turner outdoing the rest of them there. And for some reason, like you, that's when I was first really introduced to Rainbow, was that Straight Between the Eyes album. And then from there, obviously, right away, Man on the Silver Mountain, that was the next song that, that's when I kind of started learning about the band from there. But, in reality, if you look back at all the Ronnie James Dio, I would say my favorite Ronnie James Dio song, without a doubt, would be Man on the Silver Mountain. My favorite Graham Bonnet would be Since You've Been Gone. My favorite Joe and Turner song, that's a tough one. But I would say I might give it a slight nudge ahead to Street of Dreams. And the Doogie White era, maybe Stand and Fight. Well, give us your rundown on each of your favorite songs from each of the vocalists era, Dave.
Oh, yeah. My favorite Dio is Stargazer. Definitely. So, and Graham Bonnet would be Lost in Hollywood. Joe and Turner would probably be Death Alley Driver. And then Doogie White would be Ariel.
And yours, Tom?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. You didn't tell me we were going to prep that part of it. Oh, goodness.
Oh, that's not too hard to figure out.
Yeah. Joel and Turner would probably be, strangely enough, I'm going to say my favorite Joel and Turner was Spotlight Kid. I just think that's just such a fun song. I really like Jealous Lover though too, but Jealous Lover to me is a Foreigner song. It really is. It's so close to Foreigner that it's scary. It's a shame that Foreigner didn't do it again. Graham Bonnet, that one is going to go to, because I already mentioned my favorite Doogie one. Graham Bonnet, oh man, that's I guess I gotta lean to All Night Long. And Dio, man, wow. probably Long Live Rock and Roll, the title cut. It's just man, such a straight ahead. It's such a great, I don't know. It just sucks you in, and his vocal performance on it is just incredible. I mean, it really is like everything that makes Dio great in terms of what he went on to be as well, as a lead vocalist of Sabbath and in his own group Dio as well.
All right. Very good. It's a good exercise here. A lot of people, it seems like Rainbow doesn't really get, they're just due. You don't really hear a lot of people talking about Rainbow these days, other than, what's going on with the camp. Like I mentioned with Joel and Turner was trying to, get the remaining members back together, seeing if they can do some kind of like a reunion. And then of course, Richie kind of just didn't really, it's just the same old there as far as Blackmore's concerned. He's almost like he's kind of just went off and hid in the weeds. He's just like doing his own thing, and he doesn't really care about anything anymore. I kind of doubt you'll ever see him, do anything again, with any of his old bands. He had a chance to do something with Purple, but I guess he just, did he just say no, he wasn't going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, or did he just not even respond to it? Do you remember, Tom, at all, or Dave?
I think I don't think he responded.
Yeah,
He kind of put that whole chapter of his life behind him. So
yeah, and I mean, honestly, the Blackmore's Night stuff, it's really great material, and you know what, I'm happy for the guy. He seems to be in a very good marriage, and he's very happy with his wife, and he's a very creative individual. Creative individuals have very quirky personalities. I mean, Yngwie Malmsteen, there's a guy who has a reputation as being very difficult to work with, and I remember talking to Yngwie, and I had a great interview with him. He was very funny, he was very engaging, and I was very nervous about interviewing him, but he put a lot of things into perspective for me. He's like, hey man, the reason it's he did that whole Rising Force thing or whatever. And I think did Graham Bonnet ever sing with him?
Doogie did.
Doogie did. But Yngwie was kind of like, hey man, it's my band. That's why it's called Yngwie Malmsteen. It's not called, Rising Force or whatever. And I think with Richie Blackmore, even the latter, the first one was Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. And then he tried to move it to Rainbow and create this quasi collective. Todd Rundgren tried the same thing with Utopia, but was a little more successful with it. He was Todd Rundgren's Utopia, and then it was the band Utopia. But Rainbow was never really a band because they never had any kind of a stable lineup. I mean, as much as Joe Lynn Turner could say, oh, I want to get the old band back together. Well, there was no old band, Joe. You sang for Richie Blackmore, And I mean, the sad thing about Joe Lynn Turner is he's so incredibly talented, like just incredible. He's such a great vocalist. I mean, and his voice has held up all these years. And it's a shame he wasn't able to land in something so he could get out from behind this whole Rainbow thing, because he deserves better than that. He really does. He's just a phenomenal performer. Great stage presence, and everything.
All right, and we're going to end on this note here. You just mentioned something very, very there about Joe and Turner, and I remember, I seen him at this old Club Paradise back maybe about 10 years ago, and he was basically, so how he was playing basically with a bunch of known players, but just singing songs throughout his career and other covers of some of the guys that he was with. Seemed happy doing it, but I think if you look back on the Joe Lynn Turner, all the albums he sang on, all the different bands he was in, and I was thinking about this the other day, I'm going, man, he really did a whale of a job on that Yngwie Malmsteen album.
Yeah,
the one album he sang on. I mean, he sounds the best he ever did on any album. Every track on that album shines, and it's just a shame that him and Yngwie weren't able to do more than just that one album. Because I thought, man, who knows what they could have done with this one more album. Maybe it would have propelled them even into a bigger, more into the limelight.
He did a great Deep Purple record as well. I mean, again, Joe Lynn Turner, he's deserved better. I was at that show. I mean, he was in a club to 200 or 300 people, and you got the guitarist of Quiet Riot, you got the drummer from formerly of
It
Black
was Vinny.
Sabbath.
It was Vinny Appice.
Yeah, Vinny Appice, and I can't remember who the
Phil,
other guy
Phil
was.
Sassoon on bass was there.
Yeah,
And then they had Eric Norlander on keyboards, and it was Carlos Cavazo, the guitar
Carlos
player from
Cavazo,
Quiet
yeah.
Riot that you couldn't think of. But
I interviewed Carlos. He was a great interview. He took
Oh,
over
yeah.
for Randy Rhoads. He should know about stepping into some big shoes, but super nice guy as well. But yeah, it's I don't know, man. It said you're dealing with a lot of different egos and things like that. I don't understand why Joe Lynn Turner can't just go out as Joe Lynn Turner's Rainbow and just do Joe Lynn Turner Rainbow songs. He doesn't, unless there's some kind of, he's worried about some kind of legal thing or whatever. I mean, other artists do that all the time. Chasm Sultan's Utopia, went out and there was there was a distinction between that, the Todd Rundgren's Utopia, and other artists have done that. So if he just went out as Joe Lynn Turner's Rainbow, he could find an audience and maybe some clubs that he could play at. But I don't know, man. Richie's it's his, whether you like him or not, it was his baby. He's the one that invented it,
And he was the one mainstay on all the albums. He played on
It
every
was-
single
yeah.
one of them, and the only member to last through the whole history of the band. So
Because he was the boss.
exactly.
Like Mick Jones and Foreigner. He's the boss,
All right, so that was an interesting episode. We learned a lot on this one about the band, and I hope all you people out there who got a chance to check out this video, hope you got something out of it for yourselves that maybe you didn't really know about the band or something like that before. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and obviously check out these guys. Just David Hens, he's with Music and Other Drugs website that he runs. A lot of interesting, cool interviews. He does some concert reviews on there, and then of course, Mr. Thom Jennings here writes for a lot of different Niagara Gazette, and tell them some of the more of the other things you write for there. Tom, you got so many different.
I write for anybody. I write for you, Rock Show Critique, Niagara Frontier Publications, Lockport Union Sun and Journal. I've been in Goldmine. I've been in, all kinds of different things. I always like to say Goldmine. It was one article, but I still say it.
Put it on that old resume there.
Yeah, I'm like, I was in Goldmine, so.
All right, guys. Well, appreciate your time, and we'll be doing this again soon with Genesis. That's the next band that we got lined up here when the three of us will get together again sometime down the road when our schedules permit.
We will turn it on again. Is that what you're saying? Look at that. Come on. I almost made it through the whole show without a dad joke, but we had to get one in at the end.
All right. All right, guys. Thanks for coming aboard on this one, and we'll talk soon.